All right, here we are with question number 7 of properties of parallelograms, part 2. And we're going to go over the first two properties of parallelograms, which has to do with sides. So both pairs of opposite sides are parallel, and both pairs of opposite sides are congruent in a parallelogram. But if you look at the figure, you notice that we're not dealing with sides, we are dealing with angles. So one of the ways I can tell that I'm dealing with angles is I have the little degree measure after the expressions. So my next two properties of parallelograms does have to do with angles. I know that both pair of opposite angles are congruent and that the consecutive interior angles are supplementary. So I'm going to use these two to figure out the angle measures and which three of our 6 choices are correct. All right, so if both pairs of opposite angles are congruent, then angle R is congruent to angle T, and angle U is congruent to angle S. So now I'm going to look at which pair I want to work with. Do I want to work with angle R, whose measure they give me has 2 variables in it? Or do I want to look around and find some angles that just have 1 variable that's the same? So I'm going to go for angle S and angle U because angle S and angle U both have a variable that's the same in them and no extra variables. So I'm going to start my equation by saying that the measure of angle S equals the measure of angle U, so that I can set up an equation to solve for x. So 6x minus 9 is equal to 4x plus 39. So now my geometry part of all this is done as soon as I substituted in the measures that they gave me. So now I'm just going to use my algebra to solve this equation and subtract 4x from both sides because I like bringing the smaller amount of x's to the larger. So that's going to give me 2x minus 9 equals 39. Add 9 to both sides. And I get 2x equals 48. And finally divide by 2. And that leaves me with x equals 24. So now that I know what x is, I can plug it in and I can figure out the actual measure of angle S and the actual measure of angle U. So when I plug it in for angle S, I get 6 times 24 minus 9. So I find out that the measure of angle S is going to be 135 degrees. So I can write that in right here, 135 degrees. I can write it right over top of my angle. And then just to double check and make sure that I did not make a mistake, 4 times 24 plus 39, that too is going to give me 135 degrees. So because both of those work out, I know that my answer for x of x equals 24 is correct. So now I've got a choice. I can either substitute in my value of x in angle R and set it equal to the measure of angle T, or I can add the measure of angle U plus the measure of angle T, set it equal to 180. I actually like setting my two angles equal to each other since I now know what x equals. So I'm going to go with the measure of angle R equals the measure of angle T. And once again, I said you could also add the measure of angle U plus the measure of angle T together, or the measure of angle S plus the measure of angle T, and set either of those equal to 180. to figure out what y is. It's your choice. But I'm going to go with angle R equals angle T. So angle R, they told me, was 3y. And now that I know what x is, I'm going to put the 24 in for my x and set that equal to 2y minus 1. Bring my y's together by subtracting 2y from both sides. So now I have y minus 24 equals negative 1. I'm going to add the 24 to both sides. So I get y equals 23. So now I can figure out the measure of angle T and angle R. So for the measure of angle T, I've got 2 times 23 minus 1. I put my parentheses wrong. 2 times 23 minus 1. And that will give me 45 degrees. I can do the same thing with angle R, and when I substitute in 3 times 23 minus 24, I also get 45 degrees. All right, now let's look at our choices down below. Did we figure out that x equals 15? No, we did not, so we don't want to choose that option. We did figure out over here that y does equal 23, so I'm going to check that box. The measure of angle R. The measure of angle R we calculated to be 45 degrees, so we're not going to choose this option because the measure of angle R is not 27 degrees. Measure of angle S, they say, is 135. That is true, so I'm going to check that. And the measure of angle T we figured out was also 45 degrees, so we're going to check that. And when we figured out the measure of angle U, it was not 99 degrees, so I do not want to check that. I hope that helps.